Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the greenhouse. Several months ago now, I promised I'd do a breakdown video on Something Real, a single that I produced with Kimayo, and it's taken me long enough. So, depending on who you ask and what the criteria is, this is either uh, the first song or the first single I've produced with Kim, because uh, I started working with her on Phoenix, the acoustic sessions, but I have since engineered all of her singles, and now I had the opportunity to offer my services as a producer in addition to engineer. And I think Kim thinks that this song turned out really well. So here we are in the session. And a little bit of background. As you can see, I'm not in Pro Tools or Logic. I am in Universal Audio's Luna. And the background to this is that I started using Universal Audio interfaces in September or October of 2020. I got an Apollo Solo right before I finished working on my debut solo EP, Novellas. So, a few guitars at the end of that project were recorded on that. And then, earlier in 2020, Universal Audio came out with Luna, which is this DAW. It's designed specifically to interface with Apollo interfaces. And the entire idea behind it is that the workflow is intended to be a bit more like a console, to be a bit more physical. So, this is, I think, the second project I have produced, the first that got released. And basically, with those couple projects, I wanted to kind of experiment and see how far I can take Luna, how close it is to me being able to accept it. And that will be a separate video. Right now, I just want to talk about Something Real or Undone. So this song, I don't remember if Kim called it Undone or if it was kind of a working title based on the lyrics. But kind of at the end of the process, we talked about how Undone was very close to Untamed, and we kind of decided that the title of this song should be changed to something so it's not so close to the title of the last single I did with her, Becoming Untamed. So this is the fourth, fifth, maybe sixth revision of the project. You can see there's some other stuff here. There's an initial version, which is an import from a previous Pro Tools version, so you can undone return to Luna. So this is a little bit longer of a project for me, and I started in Luna, recorded almost everything in Luna, and then I started having processor issues or performance issues with my MacBook Pro. That prompted me to dump the entire project from this original Luna version, which I will not be opening because it takes freaking forever, into Pro Tools. And I won't be opening this either because I'd need to redo a whole bunch of routing stuff. After that Pro Tools project, which was used pretty much exclusively to do some synthesizer stuff, I dumped it back into Luna, and now it is here. I also mastered this in Pro Tools, so you might start to see a pattern, I guess, of Luna and then Pro Tools or something else. And again, we'll get to the finer details of the whens, whys, and hows in a second video. But this, as an example of the cool things you can do with Luna, this is a versions page, and you can load any of these versions without making a new project file. So everything is self-contained. All the audio, all of the versions, all the takes are all within this Luna file. this Luna file here. So you can see the initial version here. There's one called Without Half of Verse 2, and you see the second verse is half as long as the first. There was an edit there. I took out a secondary line, made it shorter, and then there is a final version which you hear on Spotify or Tidal or on the radio, called Short Out, because it has a short outro or coda, because I know at least one person will get mad at me because I'm calling it an outroduction. And if we zoom in here, there we go, you can kind of see where the edits are. So down here in the greens, that's all my synthesizers. That's where you can most clearly see the edits, because I needed to cut it at specific points for the chords. The drums are kind of re-looped here. The final chorus was made longer, I think. Anyway, so let me play you a few things. I'm kind of just rambling at this point. So this is kind of a vibey. It's called the Supermarché intro here, which is it's French for supermarket. Imagine that. But the idea behind it, this is a me thing, just kind of a goofy little thing that I thought would add some interesting color to the track. But what this is, and I wish I could show you, but it is effectively a snippet of the programmed demoing out section. So you can hear there's like a Rhodes doing the vocal melody. There's a chord, the kind of the pad-ish chord sound, and then there's that swell at the end. And what the real special thing about that is that it's not going to show up here, but what this effectively did was I took a reverb, the reverb I used that kind of made that sound, and I believe I did effectively 100% wet on it. There's just enough early reflection that it sounds kind of close. So this is called Good Hertz Megaverb. I adore it. It's one of the many examples that of Good Hertz making a plugin that really does nothing. There's nothing else like it. Other examples that I used on this track is Good Hertz Lossy here, which emulates MP3 compression, like format compression. So listen here. This is a very, very cool plugin that I've used on multiple projects, and it's obviously kind of a single thing. It's a unitasker, but what it does, you cannot get anywhere else. And then what you hear at the end, that is the reverb. That is me pushing the decay of the reverb up like hard. Like there's a second instance of the plugin which I'm sending all that supermarket stuff to, just to get that effect, that big swell. So anyway, the reason it's called the supermarket intro is because I artistically am very interested in more interesting lo-fi stuff, and I'm sure some of you are going to be familiar with vaporwave, or at least the concept of vaporwave. And there are several songs in particular that kind of take those songs. It's like a vaporwave is a mashup genre, basically. So it takes these old songs, generally slows them down, and then adds effects and kind of starts chopping them up, doing weird stuff with it. But there are several that kind of add this ambience to it, like you're listening to it through the intercom, like through the overhead speakers in a supermarket or a convenience store. And I love that kind of thing. I love sound design, and I love that's getting into the more post production side of it. But I wanted to do that here because I don't know. I tend not to think about things too much from like a symbolism perspective. I'm very much an aesthetic mind, speaking in generalities. Anyway, so then we get into kind of transitioning from that pre-sampled, or I guess that bounced thing into everything else. It is that.
I don't
So you can
really
hear that a lot of the stuff continues just in
really
full range.
know what you're
As an
doing.
example, let's see. The acoustic guitar is a very low part of this song, except in the technically the verse interlude here. And this is me. Um, kind of, I tried to make the guitar part as simple as possible. Let it fit into the track, because everything else over here becomes rhythm and chords and effects. So the guitar just kind of sits back. So the stuff you hear here is the bloopy toms, which I don't even remember what this was. I'm genuinely having a hard time remembering what this sound was. It's obviously programmed, but I don't remember the program itself. Maybe it was a battery bank? Anyway, and then we get to, oh, the chord. There's also the chord here, which I think is the Arturia Juno 6. And then we have a second thing. This is where Lossy comes in. And I think this effect is also in the old projects. It's been bounced down, but you can hear it starts out really kind of watery, like an early 2000s MP3, and that's the whole point of that effect in varying degrees of warbliness. But the really cool thing about Goodhertz Lossy, and I'll open it up, is that you can automate the depth of the effect, effectively as granular as you want. And as far as I can hear, there's no stair stepping on any of these, which is really, really cool. And there's also a reverb in here, which itself lends some really cool effects. I'm moving on. Then the bass and the burst drums come in. If I do that.
I don't really mind.
So this program kick is really buried down there. It's mostly this really thumpy, and this, I believe, is, yep, look at that. So I a couple of years ago, God, maybe 3.5 years ago at this point, kind of got into the habit of taking samples of all the drums I record. So a drummer comes in for a project, and after the songs are done, or in a kind of a lull in the recording, maybe we're all recording on the floor together, and like the guitarist has to take a call, and I'm like, hey drummer, would you mind recording a few variations on the kick and the snare and different hits, just so I can have them for posterity, and also if I need to repair something later on, like if they hit the snare weird, which a lot of drummers do every once in a while, even good ones. I can fly a really well recorded isolated snare in there. And this is from Novellas, from my EP. So this is me playing the drum, and this is my piece drum kit. It's got a ported head in the front, and the other programmed kit, or the programmed kick, is, I'm trying to think of what this was. There's also a program kick copy here, which happens down there. It's literally just one hit. I'm, really nailing that third chorus. I think this program kick is from a contact library in Complete 12. I don't remember which one. And then we get into the chorus.
Look at what you've done.
And we've got the big snare. And this is, I think this is just a normal snare. Maybe it was a sampled snare. The sampled snare from the bells is quite dark. I think it's a combination of a whole bunch of stuff. But I wanted that very, very 80s vibe for this whole song, and that's where this comes in. And again, you can't see it because it's bounced down, but there's also Megaverb on that. And there's Megaverb in this session somewhere. I just don't remember where it is. So we move into the verse, and there's this thing here. It stops, and then
You took my breath away.
out, it gets really vibey, and then it hits again. And I know this is not how the song sounded when I exported it. Unfortunately, there's some funny stuff going on in Luna where I am fairly certain that things are changing between me opening them, and it could be a combination of a whole bunch of things I simply don't know and can't tell. It's kind of annoying. And you'll be able to tell later here, but there's a whole bunch of kind of atmospheric stuff. This is a little 16th, just a little note going, just to keep the momentum of the song building. And then you get to the verse. There's one hit here, and the guitar. This is the most important guitar hit in the song. And there's a lot of reverb on it. And then, of course, the chorus needs to be big. It's probably the most important part of the song for the chorus to differentiate itself, from the verses. You've built the chorus, and it feels nice and big and full because there's organs going and all. There's a kind of a shimmering organ. There's just a pedal tone there. There's a church organ kind of thing, lots of distortion on it. The only other thing to mention in this second chorus is all the guitars. This would have been one of two guitars, I believe. It's either my 2014 Les Paul or a Yamaha Pacifica that has been hot rodded. So all of these guitars, no matter what the guitar was, they would have gone through Guitar Rig 6. And the reason you can't see that is because I had to bounce them down. There is a very strange issue with Guitar Rig 6 and Luna in particular, where you open it up sometimes, and it just breaks. Like it causes this tone to ring out, and it just doesn't work. And unfortunately, that forced me to bounce all of these guitars down. Now the bridge, let's play.
It's like I've been asleep.
There's a lot of stuff going on here, but I think there's a little bit under the surface that people can more feel than hear. As far as all the obvious stuff, there's not the bloopy toms. Now we got fake kit toms. There's a lot of harmonic stuff going on here. So those toms are kind of filling up the stereo image with percussion. And I love big toms, I love all the Phil Collins stuff, and honestly, I just like drums in general, even though I'm terrible at playing them. They really do something for a song, like a good drum performance and a good drum arrangement can make or break a song. Like, and the original bridge just kind of had the 4 on the floor going all the way through, and that ended up being too boring. So this is more kind of a bu da da ba ba da ba da. There we go.
It's like I've been asleep. My body's just been numb.
So get that big snare back, just for the bridge. It hits hard. There are real cymbals in here, which are real cymbals. That's me playing, regrettably. And then as far as new stuff, there's a whole bunch of effects in here. So there's a bridge pad. This is... I think this is Native Instruments Farlight. One of the new things that came with with Complete 13. And this bridge pad in particular is actually the main reason I dumped to Pro Tools, because Kontakt libraries can be enormously taxing on your computer. And under here we've got a bridge ARP, which is that kind of 8-bitty little arpeggio, pans around. And this is got Brower Motion. Love this thing. And using the two of them together, the A and B devices, lets you kind of... It really helps making the effect feel deeper instead of just being an auto panner. And then we get into the second half, which is where my favorite parts of it come in. So there's this thing called Mills Piano and Mellotron. So this is the Mrs. Mills Piano from Spitfire. Being a recording nut, the provenance of the EMI Mrs. Mills Piano, this really kind of tacky upright, is a sound I love. And you can hear it here. And that's great. Oh my god. It's an amazing piano sound. And then the other thing is this, it's slightly easier to hear in the final mix, but there's a Mellotron melody going. Mellotron organ. And then everything drops out.
The strength to come alive. We are something real. We are something
Just Kim and my guitar.
in a world of images.
And then it comes in.
We
The hit here, no percussion.
something real.
Things start to kind of fade in. And then it really hits for this final chorus to outro. And then you've heard pretty much how this goes, except that the Luna session doesn't have the fade out, which is something that I regrettably had to put into the mastering section because of a limitation in Luna itself. So it effectively starts fading out here. Very slow. Oh, and there's a low pass filter that comes in as well. I think it's on the... Let's find out where it is. Where is it? Is it just... Let's find out. I think this is it. Is that automated? Yeah. Oh no, it's the full band pass. It just comes in on the instruments only. All of this is looped, and as you can see from these little cuts here, it's been fairly heavily edited just to make sure that we have it where we want. So now we should probably talk about the vocals, because that's the most important part of the song, or any vocal song, really. So
I don't really
this song
know.
was recorded through a Universal Audio Unison mic pre, of course. And for the vocals, I used the Neve 1084. I tend to stay mostly in the API world for most stuff, but for certain voices, for certain instruments or sources, for something you want like kind of this mid-range bloom to, you really can't get any better than a vintage Neve. And then the microphone is kind of interesting. So I have used there's a couple microphones on Kim's voice, but the primary one is used on this, and it's used on Phoenix, Wildflower, and Around the Sun, is a Lawton Audio LT381 Oceanus, which is a bruiser of a microphone. It's enormous. The capsule's enormous. It's got two vacuum tubes in it. Like, it's a very particular thing, but when it works unbelievably well. And for Kim's vocals, it's kind of my favorite. For Becoming Untamed, however, we used one of my U87s because it was I'd kind of just gotten them. However, for the backgrounds, I think I used a Shure SM7B like I'm talking to now, and we can start hearing those backgrounds up here.
Like the break of day. Look at.
So this is kind of the only harmony part of this song, and this is an idea I had and mapped out in the demo form, just duplicating her demo vocals and putting it through one of those more recently released Waves pitch shifter. I don't remember what it's called now. And then the last thing in the song is these.
Look at what you done. I'm coming, look.
Which is just kind of this. I would consider this the main hook of the song. Look at what you've done. I'm coming. But it never goes to coming undone. So it just repeats. And it's they're pretty well tucked in. And I tend to be quite heavy-handed on my compression on background vocals. I leave the lead vocals to be able to get quiet and loud, but for background vocals, oh wow, this is actually pretty tame for me. Did I? Oh wow, I really didn't push it that hard. Never mind. That's actually shocking. On every other thing I've worked on in the last couple of years, background vocals would have been, diving into like -7, -10, maybe a little bit more than that. Oh well. And then there's a bunch of other stuff. There's been shakers through the song. You can't hear a ton of it. I'll just give you a peek of it. Again, it's just one of those things that's it's adding drive to the song. I don't want it to be super loud, but that this 16th here and this 8th note shaker back here. Could have sworn I panned those differently. Go figure. But these are literally just to add a little bit of rhythm and a little bit of uniqueness to the sections. And then you can also hear it here as well. If you listen closely, you can hear that shaker on the left side. Just quiet. You can feel if you remove it. There's sort of 16th kind of arpeggio thing on the right, but you can feel that the power changes. Like it just doesn't feel as, there we go, and it feels full again. That's kind of the way I think about production, or you're trying to meet an end goal, and that end goal is not how it sounds, it's how it feels. You can do a great recording, or you can do something the way that somebody tells you to, but at the end of the day, every record that we consider great, you know, an all-time classic like The Wall or Night at the Opera, you know, things of that caliber. The producers and the artists, the songwriters on those songs, were just arranging things until they felt right and they invoked the right emotion for the song. So that's the mindset I take when I'm arranging something or writing it or even engineering it. You know, like the attack and release and even the harmonic distortion from a compressor can affect how that recorded track feels, and the way one recorded track feels can affect the outcome of a whole song. And that's true in tracking, as it is in mixing, as it is in mastering. You know, I consider it all kind of a holistic process. As for other stuff, for those engineer-minded who would like to play at home, I'll show you a bit of my master bus stuff here, or my submixers here. So this is kind of the way I do everything in Pro Tools and Logic, and here in Luna as well. I set up a bunch of different submasters. So I've got buses here for the drums, and then if I need a kick and snare bus to kind of affect those and make them feel right before going to the drums, I'll add that. I've got a bass bus, acoustic guitar, electric guitar, keys, and percussion. Sometimes I have a lead and background vocals bus as well. And if I have orchestral, Jesus, I'll put that on a separate bus as well. And then all of these get fed into two submasters, instrument and vocals. And this is something that is quite important for my process, because even though I'm not really affecting them differently up here, you start to get into, you know, small things like this is, I'm taking a little bit of 700 hertz out, which is something I tend to do if something is starting to get too mid-rangey, not like up in like the 1 to 2K range, which generally sounds okay unless instruments are clashing. So 700 hertz and down at like 350 is generally those two places are generally where I hear an issue. And you can also see that there's a fair bit of noise on this. This is from I believe API summing, as well as the tape emulation, which I'll talk about in a second. And then both of these, so literally everything in the session goes into Grandmaster. And this is the last, this is where the buck stops as far as processing. So this is where all my master bus stuff is. The main output here, I literally only have an analyzer. So, I'll walk you through my master bus. So I've got the UAD G channel, or the bus compressor. I don't think it sounds like my SSL's bus compressor, but I do like it, and functionally it's a little bit more flexible than the Waves one, which I think sounds more like my mid to late E series. My console's an 85, but it has a G. Actually, it might even have a G plus time constants card on it. Anyway, then my master bus EQ changes a lot. At this point, I was using the BX Digital D3. I like it a lot. And you can see this is kind of how I set up a lot of stuff. So I've got stereo width cranked a little bit up to 141%. You have to be careful with that because you can start having phase issues quite easily if you start pushing it up further. I use Monomaker quite liberally. I think this is technically called an elliptical filter. It's basically just, it's not just cutting low end out of the sides, which it could easily have done. What it's doing is collapsing mono and stereo, collapsing any frequency at or technically under this into mono, so you're not losing anything. And of course, if you have weird ass phase already, this can make it worse. You got to be careful about that. And then I'm just making tiny, tiny changes, not more than 1.5 dB, and even that's pretty high. You know, I'm adding high end just in the mono. Actually, all of my effects, all of my EQ moves on this are just in mono. You can see I moved these around a little bit and turned them off, I guess. And then we get into the kind of goofy stuff. So this is the where I put on my horn-rimmed glasses that have been taped back together. So this is a clipper, standard clip. I downloaded a demo of like 5 different clipping tools and did a shootout of them. Standard clip won, and not by a small margin for me, because it's not just about sound and the aliasing it can cause. It's also about the functionality. So you have input and output gain. You have I believe this is the clipping threshold here. You have output gain. You have the output ceiling, and then you have multiple types of clipping. The saturator, crazy oversampling, and like it's beautiful. It just works great. And then at this point, I was using FabFilter Pro L because I was messing around with this. This is their LUFS measurement. Now, normally I'd use a plugin called good grief, Streamliner. Here we go, Adapter Streamliner. And this shows you, it not only shows you LUFS in a really nice way, but it also, you can turn on the codecs for all of this stuff. So obviously, Tidal Hi-Fi is lossless, and then you get into the lower end streaming stuff. But it can show you Apple Music. It gives you the LUFS range for each of these. Of course, if you're like me, you're probably going to master your stuff to Spotify standards, or just not care about LUFS at all. Those are kind of the 2 ways I think about it, depending on the project. Because I personally turn off the standardization. It does weird stuff, in my opinion. And then finally, this is probably the dorkiest of all. And I bought it primarily because putting it in my cart made the entire purchase cheaper. But then whenever I'm doing mission critical dithering, I use this. So this is another plugin from GoodHertz. It's called Good Dither. And it does exactly what it says on the tin. So you can see there's a whole bunch of, you are literally seeing how much each bit is being used. And there's a couple plugins that do this and that even go past 32 bits. But I've it dithering to 24-bit. I'm using GoodHertz optimal dithering, and you can go to their site and look at their dithering compared to a whole bunch of other dithering algorithms, and then optimal noise shaping. So everything is optimal. Oops, there we go. Of course, all this noise here. So you're seeing up to like the 15th bit. That is all the noise from, I guess, what we're going to talk about now. So this gets into what's very special about Luna. And I've kind of been scrolling past it and not mentioning it. So right here is a whole bunch of cool stuff. So on the channels, you have 2 sections. You have tape. I'm using all Studio 800 for this, except for the bass. It's using Oxide. And then, currently the only option for this console panel is API Vision. Now, if you don't know, I went to college, the New England School of Communications up in Bangor, Maine. They have mostly, and maybe all at this point, API consoles. So all of my junior and senior work was done on an API vision. I got very used to it. I liked how it worked, and I just love API in general. Their mic pre's are great. Their consoles are great. They're super flexible. You know, if there's API EQs in it, I won't complain. They're not my favorite, but they are very functional. So here we have some very cool stuff. So this Studer A800 works exactly like the plugin. Actually, I think all of these are linked by default. You can see B there. That means that this is the B machine. Oh, so the B machine, all the functions for all the basic functions for like speed and stuff like that are synced across this entire session. And Oxide will do the same. If you put C or D in there, they'll do the same. So you can have like groups of tape machines. It's very cool. And then down here, the API Vision is literally the whole API Vision channel strip, except this, before you add Spark, this was native processing. And that is really cool because I have, I've got a UAD Octo satellite, and I have I've got a Apollo X8P, and you can see here that I'm not using much of either of them. But in a larger session, like you might be able to fit like 2/3, maybe a half this number of. Oh wow, I actually have less than I thought, so I'm all wrong here. You definitely fit this many Vision channel strips on DSP, but I could have had it like out to here. Every single track could have had UAD stuff. You can see here that the render is at 60% ish. Anyway, so that's quite a comprehensive selection. Honestly, that I was able to put this many modules up at 96K, and then all of this freaking tape. Like, that's pretty remarkable. Like, I was definitely pushing the computer, but it worked. And if you go over to the buses are completely different. So you have summing options up here, and currently the only options are API and Neve. I use API because the low end it gave me on this particular project was immense, and it just was really thick. But one thing I did notice is that you have to have more layers of API sound in Luna to equate to what a real API console would sound like. Then you get down to other stuff. So the master tape, instead of like a multi-track tape on the channels, you get master tape. And the only option here is the ATR 102. And this is one of my very favorite plugins that I have. This goes on almost every mix I do, depending on the style or what may be lacking from a mix I'm working on. It either goes on 15 or 30 IPS. I change the head width fairly often. It's on 1/4 inch for this one. It's a little bit grainier and a little bit less high end. Excuse me. You go up to 1/2 inch or 1 inch, I believe. Calibration changes a lot. I tend to like it on +3, and then tape also changes a lot because there are very subtle differences between them. And then you see it less here because these are pretty much right at the normal levels. But I tweak the record head. I switch between in and out. I tweak the record and repro heads, repro levels, excuse me, to get like exactly in the sweet spot for the rest of my gear. And then finally, I didn't use any on this track, I don't think. You can see there's an API 2500 here, but this is a UAD plugin. What you can do here is check this out. An API 2500. Ah, but again, in native, which is really, really cool. And the one thing to note is that you can't put a 2500 on a channel. If you wanted an API 2500 on a multi-track channel, you'd have to use you'd have to use the DSP version. And the other cool thing to note is that you can take this and put it anywhere, as if it's a normal plugin, which it effectively is. Anyway, so this is kind of how something real came about and how it got put together. Moses. There's really like I don't consider this to be a particularly complicated project. There was just a lot of care taken into how these elements were used because obviously, if you look at a like major pop production, you're going to have 100 tracks, 200 tracks. Like it gets obscene. How many tracks do I have on this? Will it tell me? Not really. Really shockingly few. I do think that's it. There's really, besides working in Luna and having all those little Luna specific toys, there's not really much to talk about. Like, I could show you every reverb I use and how I set up my drums and the horrible gain staging that this project ended up having. Like, you can see literally every time I play, the overload comes on, and like, no matter like of course they're turning red here, but like no matter how hard I tried to stop the overloading, I couldn't do it. Like there's something wrong with the metering in Luna that I feel like I'm saying that a lot. Am I spoiling the next video? Oh man. Anyway, so this is a this is how uh, the song came together. I hope you have gotten something interesting from this. I'm going to go and pause my recorders and then get ready for a little talk about Luna itself. Thank you for watching, everyone.